actually looking at why service tax. Then we discussed as to what is the definition of service, right? And in that we looked at the definition that service means any activity which is done by one person to another, and we said that it includes declared services. And we discussed what are declared services. Then we also discussed what are the activities which will not be considered as services, right, Sneha? So we were discussing those aspects of service tax in the last class. Today we would be moving a little further from there, and we'll try to understand as to what could be the various we'll try to understand with the help of various practical situations as to whether a particular situation will amount to a service or not. And we would also look at the point of taxation. We'll look at the scope of this particular law, right? Most likely what we are going to do, more so what we would be doing, we would be looking at the practical aspects. So we discussed the charging section, and we discussed the definition of service in the last class. I welcome Monica also to the class. Monica, teaching Monica, it's looking good. uh, Monica is a student from Assam. uh, So we discussed about the definition of service, and then I was looking at the explanations to the definition of service, as you must remember. And we discussed that in case the services are provided by MPs and MLAs in their capacities as MPs and MLAs, then they would be not considered as a service. Similarly, we said that when it is exchange of currency, or when it is exchange of money from one denomination to another, then also it would not be considered as a service, right? We also discussed that in case there is an unincorporated association or body of persons, and I gave you the example of the Resident Welfare Association as well. So in that situation, even the persons who are the members of this particular association would be considered as a distinct entity. So if a association or an unincorporated body like a club or an association provides any services to its members, then also it would be considered as a service, right? An establishment. And similarly, in case there is one person who's having an establishment in a taxable territory, and he is having another establishment outside the taxable territory, then also these two establishments would be considered as distinct persons for the purpose of definition of service, right? And in case anybody is having a branch or an agency or a representational office in outside the taxable territory of India, that will be considered as an establishment. So this is what we discussed in the last class. Now today I would like to sum up all those things which we have discussed so far into one particular aspect in with the help of some practical situations, and try to understand all that in a better manner, and then to move ahead. So here we've understood that the activity, if it is liable to be, if it has to be liable to service tax, it has to be an economic activity, because it has to be for a consideration. So any charitable activity or any activity which we give as a gift, that activity will not be considered as service for the purpose of service tax. And there has to be two persons. So if any activity is done by one person for himself, it does not amount to a service under service tax. So there has to be a service provider, and there has to be a service recipient, and there has to be a consideration. Now on consideration, one is that we can understand what is the actual consideration, what is the amount which has been paid or received in a given transaction. But it can even be a consideration which can be valued, because it may also happen that we try to evade payment of service tax by not paying the full consideration, or maybe paying the consideration in some other manner. So there comes the determination of valuation rules, and we would be talking about that as a separate topic in some other day. So therefore it has to be a monetary service. If it is a non-monetary service, it would not be considered as a service. But if it is a barter, then we'll go to the valuation rules, right? If I say that, okay, you do this for me and I'll give you this, not money but something else, in that situation we will have to go to the valuation rules and find out the amount of, or the value of consideration. Service service tax is chargeable even when the advance is paid. Now why so? Because as I discussed with you in the last class, I told you that the point of taxation is when Oh, I had kept the recording on pause. Just a second. Yeah. So the point of taxation is when the service has been provided or agreed to be provided. So when you pay advance, at that point of time, service has been agreed to be provided, right? And therefore, even when we receive advance, we have to charge service tax, we have to deposit service tax with the government. Now, if it is a deposit, now we are coming to a different situation here. Supposing the service recipient has given a deposit to the service provider. Now it can be two kinds of deposits. It can be a refundable deposit or it can be a non-refundable deposit. If it is a refundable deposit, then there is no service because it's a refundable deposit. I'm going to get my money back. But if it is a non-refundable deposit, that means it is going to be adjusted against the services which would be provided, and therefore on that service tax is chargeable. Now, in the contract of provision of service, if we have a clause which talks about demurrage or accidental damage, which is in the nature of penalty, like in case there would be any damages, during the period of the contract, then the service recipient would be liable to pay, or the service recipient would be liable to would be entitled to deduct. In that situation, this is in the nature of penalty. It is not a service which is being provided, it is actually a penalty which is being charged, and that is why it will not amount to a service. So the penalties will not amount to service, whether it is when it is in the case of an accidental damage or any demurrage or anything else. But when it is a late payment, now late payment here is like, interest is charged on the late or a delayed. So this is interest. Why it is charged? Because the payment is delayed for the service. So on the interest amount, again service tax is chargeable. Now it may also happen that you've provided the service, but the recipient of service, when he wants to make the payment, when he has to make the payment, he deducts some amount. This is something which is very, very, very common, isn't it? When we take interior decoration services, or even when we take any kind of a service, we try to pay a little less later on, saying that the services were not up to the mark, and that is why we've deducted some amount. In that situation, whatever amount you've received, even if it is a short payment, service tax would be charged on that only, on the amount received. It cannot be on the the amount that you've not received. Further, in case there are any bad debts, in case you've provided the service but the service recipient does not make a payment to you, that is a situation of a bad debts. In that situation, when you write off the bad debts, you will reverse the service tax as well. And in the next month, see, just try to understand, supposing in the month of you are in the month of July and you provided services worth rupees 10,000. Now you sent your invoice, and your customer does not make a payment to you, right? Your client does not make a payment to you, say for a period of 3 months, and after 3 months he says, I do not want to make a payment to you and I'm not going to pay, or he is declared an insolvent. So when you will write off these 10,000 rupees, you will reverse the service tax as well. Just one second, I'll be discussing this. Yes. So what I was saying is that supposing in the month of July you provided a service and after 3 months the party becomes insolvent. Now what do we do? We are in the month of October. We are in the month of October. So in the month of October, now when you provided the service, when you raise the invoice, you charge service tax and deposit it with the government. So you charge on 10,000 rupees, you charge 14,450 as the amount of service tax and deposited it with the government. In the month of October, you come to know that the amount is not going to be realizable. And for the other services that you've provided, supposing in the month of October, you've provided 50,000 rupees worth of services to other clients. Now, what you will do, and you've collected how much? You've collected 7,200 rupees, right? As service tax. Now, in this month, you will not deposit 7,200 rupees with the government. You will reverse this 10,000 rupees here. So your net services would be 40,000 rupees. And from this 7,200 rupees, you will reduce 1450, and the balance amount you will deposit with the government in the month of October. So you're getting my point. Whenever, in case of bad debts, whenever the service is the amount of invoice is reversed, the service tax is also reversed, and it gets adjusted in the year in which the debt has gone bad. Right? Clear? Why not charging 14.5% on 40,000? See, the thing is that for on every invoice you would be charging, right? So now this 50,000 might be containing 10 different invoices. And on every invoice you would be charging. This adjustment you would be doing at the time of payment of service tax and at the time of filing the return. You're getting my point? Because on every bill you would be charging, you this is like an adjustment. Got it? So on every bill you would be in routine, as you're charging service tax, you would be charging. And when you file your return with the service tax department, you will inform that okay, this month the services provided were 50,000, the bad debts written off were 10,000. So net services were 40,000. Amount collected was this much, amount reversed is this much. So this is what is payable. Right? Now coming to what is taxable territory. What is the taxable territory? So only on that amount which is not receivable tax is calculated. No, I did not get it. I mean 10,000 is not receivable. No, the amount is calculated first on the complete 50,000, and then whatever, see, just try to understand it. It's very simple. It is simple accounting. What we do, we have when you go to any particular shop, they have got a billing machine. You've seen that machine? It is there with everybody. All counters these days have it. So in the billing machine they raise bills. Okay. And in the bill they mention the service amount and the service tax amount. Okay. Now in the end of the day or in the end of the month, for all the bills they will aggregate the service amount and they will aggregate the service tax amount. Right, Sneha? Is it fine? Now, when they have to deposit the service tax with the government, they will open up the bad debts account as well and see how many service tax amount receivable has become bad debt, right? So when you go to the bad debts account, you will see that this much amount has been reversed. So from that account, you will pass on, you will net off this end of the month service amount and the end of the month service tax amount, and whatever is the balance amount that will be payable to the government. Is it clear? Now is it getting fine? Okay. Now, what is the taxable territory over here? Taxable territory means the complete territory of India except the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And if you look at the waters of India, it extends to 200 nautical miles inside the sea, which is called the exclusive economic zone. When we talk about exclusive economic zone, it includes not only the bed of the sea, it also includes the air above it and the land below it, right? So exclusive economic zone is up to 200 nautical miles in the sea. So it includes the whole of India, 200 nautical miles in the sea, except the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And any service which is provided in this particular taxable territory, that would be chargeable to service tax in India, whether it is provided from inside the taxable territory or it is provided from outside the taxable territory. That means that whether it is an import of service or it is a service that you are taking within the country, that is domestic consumption, but export of services will not be chargeable to service tax, because export of services, in case of export of services, service is not provided in the taxable territory of India, right? Service is provided outside the taxable territory in that particular situation. So then next comes what is a taxable event, which I discussed with you earlier also. Taxable event is the time when the services have been provided or agreed to be provided. Now, why this particular event, why this particular point of time is important, which I would be discussing with you in the point of taxation rules as well, because this is the event when the rate of service tax, value of taxable service, and rate of exchange, all the three things have to be determined. So we need to understand on what particular date and at what particular time do I have to check the rate of service tax, do I have to check the rate of exchange, and the value of taxable service. In general, we will take the date of invoice as the point of taxation. We in general, as I said, it's not you know it is not a rule, but in most of the situations, date of invoice would be considered as a point of taxation. So that means that whenever you raise an invoice, you have to charge service tax. So, but when should I raise an invoice? Then the question comes, when should I raise an invoice? See, in general, the rule says, so Rule 4A of the service tax rules provides that the service that the service tax should be charged and the invoice should be raised not later than 30 days from the date of completion of service or receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. So if you have received the payment or you have provided a service, within 30 days you have to raise an invoice, you have to issue an invoice. And if the invoice is not issued within the prescribed period of 30 days, in that situation, the date on which you provided the service will be considered as a point of taxation, will be considered as a point of taxation. Now you would say that, but ma'am, you said that if I receive advance, then also I have to charge service tax. Yes, and therefore whenever advance is received, there is a proviso which says that whenever advance is received, in that situation service tax would become payable even if invoice is not issued. Even if invoice is not issued, then also you will have to charge service tax as per rule 3B of the point of taxation rules. So, and the further details we would be looking at in the point of taxation rules. So the point is, should be, the basic structure should be clear. If I receive advance, immediately that becomes a point of taxation. Otherwise, without receiving advance, if I first provide the service, in that situation I have to raise the invoice within a period of 30 days of providing the service or receiving the payment, whichever is earlier. If and on that date when I raise the invoice, that will be considered as a point of taxation. But if I do not raise the invoice, then in that situation the point at which I provided the service, that will be considered as a point of taxation. Right? Is it getting clear to everybody? Okay. So if it is clear, then give me an answer to this question. According to the Finance Act 1994, all services received and consumed on the territory of dash are not taxable. This is something which is easy. All the services received and consumed on the territory of dash are not taxable. Okay. Outside India is fine. Yeah, it should be, the answer should be Jammu and Kashmir. Very good. See, the thing is that outside India and Jammu and Kashmir, we can take it like that as well, because Jammu and Kashmir is also considered as outside India. Okay. Now coming to rate of tax. Now, why I'm saying it as very, very important, because rate of tax has been one thing which has been constantly changing with respect to service tax, right? Because in the budget speech of 2015, the finance minister Arun Jaitley increased the rate of service tax from 12.36%. That included service tax of 12% and 3% education cess, making it 12.36%, to a consolidated rate of 14%, right? So he said that now there would no more be any education cess. We will be increasing the rate of service tax from 12.36% to 14%. Thereafter, there was another section 119 in the Finance Act of 2015, which contained the provisions for levy and collection of Swachh Bharat cess. So, with effect from 15th of November 2015, this section 119 of the Finance Act 2015 came into effect, and now the effective rate of service tax is 14.5%. right? From 15th of November, the effective rate of service tax is 14.5%. Now, in the examination, if you get a question, just why am I emphasizing it on why am I emphasizing it so much? In the examination, generally you are required to calculate the service tax liability on a monthly basis. Calculate the service tax for the month of September, or for the month of November, or for the month of December. Now, if in the examination the month is specified, then if the date is prior to 15th November, calculate the rate at the rate of 14%. If it is after 15th November, you have to make the calculations at the rate of 14.5%, including Swachh Bharat cess. And if nothing is given, then please mention a small note under your answer, that it is assumed that the services were provided after 15th November 2015, and that is why the rate which we are taking for calculation is 14.5%. I would be doing most of my questions with you at the rate of 14.5% only, right? Now, with effect from 1st of June 2016, which is not applicable to your examination, but it has been a provision which was inserted by way of Finance Act of 2016. With effect from 1st of June 2016, another Krishi Kalyan cess of 0.5% has been levied on the service tax, and now the effective rate is going to be 15%. This is not applicable for your examination, but in case you still want to mention it for the convenience or for the knowledge of the examiner that you know it, you can write it in the note as well, that with effect from 1st June 2016, the rate would be 15%, because 0.5% Krishi Kalyan cess shall also be levied. Right? Right? So we have got various rates. It's not very difficult, but it should be in your information with the dates. Right? Now, in some cases, definitely there is an abatement which is available, which I would be talking to you. Is Swachh Bharat cess applicable on excise? No, it is not. There is no notification as such on that. Service tax cannot be levied on value of goods. Therefore, VAT and service tax are mutually exclusive. In case, see, this is very, very clear, that service tax would be chargeable on services, not on goods. So, wherever you have got any transaction in goods, VAT would be applicable, not the service tax would be applicable. Whenever there would be a transaction in services, service tax would be applicable. Now, I said that import and export of services. I said all the services which will be provided in the taxable territory of India would be chargeable to service tax. All the services which would be provided in the taxable territory of India would be chargeable to service tax. So that means that all services which will be imported in India, on that we are going to charge service tax. So when we import a service, we make a payment in dollars, right? We make a payment in dollars, or we make a payment in foreign currency. That foreign currency has to be converted into Indian currency if you have to charge service tax, right? So for that we need to have the rate of exchange. So rate of exchange would be the rate of exchange which will be notified by the customs department, not by the RBI. The rate of exchange which will be notified by the customs department will be taken for the purpose of calculation of conversion rate, for the purpose of conversion of foreign currency into domestic currency. Now, in the examination, there was a question which said that mention the relevant date for determination of rate of service tax, value of taxable service, and rate of exchange, if any, under the provisions of Finance Act 1994. So now we know that it is the point of time when the services have been provided or agreed to be provided, right? That is the point of taxation. So on that particular date, we'll look at the rate of service tax, we will look at the value of taxable service, and we will be looking at the rate of exchange, right? Right? So section 67A of the Finance Act mentions the rate of service tax, value of taxable service, and rate of exchange, if any, shall be the rate of service tax or the value of taxable service or the rate of exchange in force or as applicable at the time when the service has been provided or agreed to be provided. Right? So therefore, rate of exchange we will have to look as per the Customs Act and not as per the Finance Act, not as per the RBI rate. Now, this is a question that came in the last examination. It said, XYZ Limited An Indian company provides a taxable service to its other establishment in USA. Can the services provided by an establishment of a person in a taxable territory to another establishment of the same person in the non taxable territory be considered as export of service? Give reason in brief. Now, if I look at the explanation to the definition of service, which I was looking at, there it was told to me that if the service that the establishment of a person in a taxable territory and the establishment of the same person in a non-taxable territory would be considered as two separate entities, right? You remember that explanation? You remember that explanation that I had shown you? Right. But now the question is that can we consider this the transaction between the two as export of services? Now, here, before I go further, let me take a lighter side of it. See, if we consider anything as export of service, then we have liability, like the government has to pay, has to give duty drawback, has to provide rebate of payment, and then it has to give a refund of Sunvet credit. All those provisions we've already discussed when we discussed the excise, right? Whenever there is an export, you get the refund of Sunvet credit, right? That is, these are the provisions that you've already seen. Now, if it becomes an export of service, then government will have to provide all that. So the answer is that even though such persons have been specified as distinct persons under explanation 3 to section 65b-44, which defines service, yet the transaction between such establishments have not been recognized as export of service in terms of rule 6a 1f of the service tax rules 1994. So, though they are distinct persons, but still the transaction between them is not recognized as an export of service under the rules. As a consequence, there cannot be any export of service between XYZ and its other establishment in USA. Exports are not eligible for tax benefit where the exporter is entitled to claim rebate of duties and taxes paid on inputs or input services used in exported service. Further, in case of service provided to an overseas establishment of the same person, benefit of Senvat credit is denied. So you do not get the Senvat credit if you're exporting to your establishment only outside India. You do not get the benefit of Senvat credit, and you will not count it as an export of service as well. So no benefit of rebate or refund or drawback, anything, nothing is available in this particular situation. The situation is clear, though the explanation says that these are distinct persons, but it has not been recognized as an export of service under service tax rules, right? Is it clear? Is it clear? So we would be discussing the next review question over here. I think this question also came in last examination only. The petitioner, a charitable society, is engaged in running internationally renowned schools. It allowed other schools to use its name, logo, motto, and as a consideration thereof, receive collaboration fees from such schools, which comprise of a non-refundable amount and an annual fees. So there is a charitable society which is running schools, and it is giving its name, logo, motto. That means it's like a franchising, isn't it? If I look at the transaction, though we are talking it as a collaboration fees, but in the normal language we call it as a franchising. The schools were required to observe certain obligations, terms, and an unimpeachable confidentiality. Right? So the schools had to work on the guidelines given by the charitable society only. Department contended that the petitioner was engaged in providing franchise service and accordingly issued show cause notice proposing to recover service tax along with interest and penalty, because you're getting an annual fee and you've also got a non-refundable amount. So therefore you must charge service tax. Examine the validity of the department's action with reference to decided cases, if any. Now, before I go further, we have to just understand the definition of service. Definition of service is when one person does something for another for a consideration. Now, there are two different people, a charitable society and the other schools. They're two different people. There is a consideration involved, right? So it can amount to a service, isn't it? So this is the facts of this case are similar to Mayo College General Counsel, and the decision has been given by High Court. The High Court said that the petitioner has permitted other schools to use their name, logo, and also motto. This is clearly a case of a franchising service. Like when you look at a lot of the franchising outlets, it is based upon that only. And here, the petitioners realized the franchise or the collaboration fees from the franchisee schools. So, therefore, the petitioner was duty bound to pay service tax to the department. In view of the above mentioned ruling, the department's action is valid and the service tax has to be paid in case of franchisee services. Right? Any doubts? Is the case clear? Okay. Another interesting case here is a case which will become clear with the definition of declared services, which I discussed with you in the last class. Neem Infotech, while retaining the copyright with it, is selling information technology software as shrink wrap software, multiple user paper license, and internet download. So it is selling some information technology software as these kinds of various software, as these kinds of items. In terms of the end user license agreement, the contract is given for customized development of software delivered online or downloaded on the internet. The assessee is of the view that since it has been settled by the Supreme Court ruling in TCS case that the software branded as well as unbranded is goods, there is no element of service and hence service tax cannot be levied in this case. It said that we are selling software, whether it is a branded software or an unbranded software, we should be charging service, we should be considering it as goods, and there should not be any service element involved. Now this is similar to, like, if I'm looking at the case, though I'm not chargeable to service tax, but this is similar to like when I provide the pen drives to the students. It is for a particular period of time that you have gotten access to that particular pen drive, right? So discuss in the light of the case law, if any, the following questions: whether the transaction may be called as sale or deemed sale, whether the transaction is liable to service tax. If yes, state the category of the service also. Now, will it be called as a sale or a deemed sale, or will it be called as a service? Right? So, here the matter came before the courts and the decision had to be given. Now, if you look at the definition of declared service, which I'll just share with you because that is an important definition over here, it says temporary transfer or permitting the use of or enjoyment of intellectual property right and information technology software services are included over here, but there is a clarification which says that all software branded or unbranded, right, would be amounting to sale of software would amount to sale of goods, and therefore it should not be chargeable to service tax. So the situation is clear in front of us. We try to look for the solution. Now the facts of this particular case are similar to Infotech Software Dealers Association versus Union of India, where it was held that although the software is goods, that's understandable, and that is what was contended by the assessee also. Whether the transaction amounts to sale or service would depend upon individual transaction. And for the reason of that challenge, the amended provision cannot be held to be unconstitutional so long as the Parliament has got the legislative competency to enact law in respect of tax on service and exercise of powers under entry 97 of list 1 of schedule 7. So they said that how could you put it in declared service? It is a transaction amounting to sale of goods, and this is something which is unconstitutional in nature. The court said that no, if the Parliament has got a power to levy service tax under entry number 97, nothing is unconstitutional. It is not unconstitutional. Now coming to the point of sale and service. What is a sale? When you sell anything, you transfer the goods as well as the right to use them and the right to transfer them as well. There's a difference. Just try to understand. When I sell you something and if I give you the ownership of those goods, then you've got the right to sell it further, right? That is called a sale. Sale is what? Sale is where the ownership in the goods is transferred. And what is ownership? Ownership means that you're capable of using it, and you're capable of transferring it. In case of Neem Infotech, since the developer has retained the copyright of the software, the dominant intention was just to transfer to the subscribers or the members only the right to use the software. Now, the license to use the software, which does not involve the license to transfer the use, right, will not be considered as sale, and it cannot be considered as a deemed sale of goods. Here, the activity will fall in the definition of service under declared service category specified in clause F of section 66E. As held in the case of Infotech Software Dealers Association versus Union of India, that when the transaction between the assessee and the customer is such that the software is not sold, it is just that the license to use it has been transferred, then such arrangement amounts to provision of service and therefore will be liable to service tax. The services are liable to service tax as a declared service under clause D है या F है of the section 66E of the Finance Act 1994. Is the point getting clear? So difference between sale and service should be very, very clear with respect to software services. Can we move to the next question? Here, before I go to the next question, I just wanted to check out a few things. One is that I am planning to keep okay, it's fine, Monica. I'm planning to keep back to back classes from Monday to Saturday in the next week for ATLP new syllabus students. Can I understand what is the level of comfort that you have if we keep the classes on Monday, Tuesday, then Wednesday we have the ATLP test, so we will not keep a class on that day. So Monday, Tuesday, then ATLP test, then Thursday, Friday, Saturday. No, on Saturday I think I'll be changing the time because it is an off day for everybody. But on other days we will be keeping it at the same time. Yes, Neha? Okay. So we go ahead with this because see, it is high time that we run a little faster on the syllabus. That is why I was planning to keep classes regularly every day. Now, the next question is discuss whether service tax is leviable on the monthly contribution collected from members to be used by Residents Welfare Association for the purpose of making payments to third parties in respect of commonly used services or goods. Now, when we talk about service tax, don't you feel that these are the transactions that we are looking at least on a day to day basis, isn't it? Like when we talk about using a software, when we talk about using certain services from the resident welfare associations or anything for that matter, there are lots of transactions that you see very regularly in your life, and therefore service tax becomes very, very friendly subject for all of us. Now this is a situation where there are members of resident welfare association. They are paying monthly contribution to the RWA for the purpose of making payments for maintenance of the area, for cleaning, for giving them a power backup, providing them with the lift facility, providing them with electrician, providing them with the plumber, and all these services, right? Or maybe security services. So in this situation, now when we discussed about the definition, when we discussed about the definition of service, and we looked at the explanations, we said that any service which is provided by an unincorporated entity to its own members would be considered as a service. So I think when we talk about a residents welfare association, it is coming in that part of the definition. So, in a residential complex, monthly contributions collected from members used by the Resident Welfare Association for the purpose of making payments to the third parties in respect of commonly used services like for providing security service, for maintenance or upkeep of the common area, common facilities like lift, water, health, fitness center, swimming pool, payment of electricity bill for the common area, etc. Now, these are the services which are provided by the Resident Welfare Association. Now, though the Resident Welfare Association and the members are distinct entities so far as that particular explanation to the definition of service goes, but still it is exempted from payment of service tax till the amount of rupees 5,000 per month. There is a notification number 25/2012 which talks about the mega exemption as well, which specifically exempts services provided by an unincorporated body or a non-profit entity registered under any law for the time being in force, such as RWAs, to its own members. However, a monetary ceiling has been prescribed for this exemption, calculated in the form of rupees 5,000 per month per member contribution to the RWA for sourcing of goods or services from third person for the common use of its members. So if the RWA is charging anything less than 5,000 rupees per month, no service tax. Any amount charged more than 5,000 rupees per month would be charged to service tax. So the point is clear? Is the point clear? Okay. Another interesting area under service tax is the works contract. The definition of works contract has been given under section 65B, clause 54 of the Finance Act 1994. What is a works contract? If I'm just giving it not in terms of the definition which has been given, I am just looking at it as a layman's term. It is a contract for work and where the material supply is incidental to the contract of work. For example, you go to a tailor, give him a cloth and tell him to stitch it, right? This you do it on a regular basis. Now the tailor uses the stitching thread, the tailor uses some of the buttons on his own, right? So while he has taken a contract for work, but he's also providing you some supply of material. Similarly, you go to a Xerox shop, you ask him to Xerox a particular document for you. Now when he gives you a Xerox copy, he also gives you the paper on which the Xerox has been given. You go to a photographer, you go to a photo studio, ask him to click a picture of yours. He gives you the printout of the picture, so he also charges you for the paper in that particular picture. You're getting my point. This is like a works contract where there is a contract for work, but the supply of material is incidental to the contract of work. I hope I'm clear when we talk about a works contract. What is a works contract? Is the point getting clear? What is a works contract? Now, here there is a contract of work, but the supply of material is incidental to the contract of work. So now there are two things that we have to understand, that this this material which is being supplied to you, it should be it should be a part of that particular contract. So the property in the goods should pass when the contract is getting executed. It is part and parcel of that particular thing. If we can really if we can really segregate the two things, then we can say this is the contract of service and this is a contract for supply of goods. Or if the goods are supplied later on and the service is provided first, or if the goods are provided first and the services are provided later on, we can simply put them separately. But right now we're talking about those situations where the property in the goods pass as the contract is getting executed. Now in this particular situation, how do we value how much is the service component, how much is the material component? The first is, if you can really find out the actual value of the service and the actual value of the product, if it is possible, then then whatever is the service portion, you should charge service tax on that. But many a times these contracts are indivisible in nature. The kind of contracts that I just mentioned to you, they are completely indivisible in nature. In that situation, we would be referring to the valuation rules. In general, it is taken as 70% as service tax, as service part portion, and 30% as the material portion. But there are different rates: 60%, 40%, 30%. All these rates are there for different kinds of contracts that are there. So here you don't have to get confused. We would be talking about it later also when we discuss it further. In construction contracts, basically this kind of a situation comes a little more, where so we would be talking about when land is a part of that particular contract or not, but accordingly the rates are going to differ. Accordingly, your service portion rates and the abatement rates are going to be differing. So whenever this a kind of a situation comes in front of you, then another interesting point over here is that just try to understand the situation. If you sell goods, which is the tax that you charge on sale of goods? What tax that you charge VAT. And on provision of service, you charge service tax. Now, when you charge service tax, on service tax, you can utilize your SENVAT credit. Yes or no? But on VAT, can you utilize your SENVAT credit? No. So now, supposing if I've got SENVAT credit, on what all can I have SENVAT credit? I can have SENVAT credit on inputs, on capital goods, and on input services. This SENVAT credit I have, and I'm providing certain works contract. I'm entering into a works contract. Now, in the works contract, supposing the bill amount is 100 rupees, I'm told that 70% of that would be service, right? Now, how much SENVAT credit can I utilize? You will say I would utilize 100% of SENVAT credit on input services. Why should I not? Why should I not? Right? Right? Again, you will say that I will utilize 100% of SENVAT credit on capital goods as well. Why should I not? Because on capital goods also I've got the right to utilize the SENVAT credit. Then the department says, okay, in that situation, because inputs are those things which you're going to utilize for the purpose of providing the material only, so no SENVAT credit on inputs in case of works contract. Otherwise, yes, but in case of works contract, no SENVAT credit on inputs. The justification is that the input portion would be covered under VAT, and for that we cannot provide you the SENVAT credit. I hope you've understood the point. So it is like the SENVAT credit is not taken as 70% of SENVAT credit. We take full SENVAT credit on capital goods, full SENVAT credit on input services, but no SENVAT credit on inputs in case of works contract services. Fine. So on this, there was a question in the last examination. Bhuvan Limited was awarded a contract for providing repair and maintenance services in respect of an immovable property for rupees 3,50,000. Repair and maintenance for an immovable property, and we generally do that, isn't it? Like if I have got a property and it needs repair and maintenance, I generally call a contractor and tell him to do this, that, and I tell him that okay, you only get the goods and you only get the labor and you only do everything, and this is the amount that I'm going to pay to you. This is something which is very common. So with respect to moved property, rather it is the most common thing. So as per the terms of the contract, the material required for repair and maintenance was also provided by Bhuvan Limited. So it's like a works contract now, right? Though he has taken the contract for repair and maintenance, but it is incidental of that particular contract that the material required will also be brought by him. Are said services subject to service tax? Are said services subject to service tax? Answer is yes. If so, determine the service tax liability of Bhuvan Limited. Now, this is to be seen. This is a contract which includes both services as well as materials. So, therefore, it falls within the scope of the definition of works contract as defined under Section 65B54 of the Finance Act 1994, and is thus liable to service tax as declared service under Section 63EH of the Finance Act 1994. So, in the given case, since the material details of the material or service portion separately are not available, the value of the service portion in the execution of works contract will be determined as per Rule 2A 2B of the Service Tax Determination of Value Rules 2006. Now, if you look at those rules, they have given a composition scheme kind of, where they say that wherever there is certain services which are provided with respect to immovable property, depending upon whether the land is being transferred or not. If the land is not there, then they have a particular ratio, and otherwise the ratios are different. So in this particular situation, because land is not getting transferred, it's simply a contract for repair and maintenance, 70% of it is considered as the service portion, right? 70% of it is being considered as a service portion. So that means 70% of 3,50,000, that is equals to 2,45,000, would be considered as service portion. On that, we will be charging 14.5% as a rate of service tax, assuming that the services were provided after 15th of November 2015. So the amount of service tax payable is 35,525. Right? You simply have to mention the assumption that assuming that the services were provided after 15th of November 2015, that is why we're taking the rate of service tax as 14.5%. Is it clear? Is it getting clear? If yes, then give me the answer to this question. The service tax is administered and collected by. No, 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 no. Administration and collection cannot be by the act. Administration and collection is an administrative responsibility. And the administrative responsibility is with whom? It is not a legislative responsibility. Come on, I'm looking for this answer. Simple answer. Central government, which department? Which ministry? Central government, I do understand. Which particular ministry, which particular department? Under the central government, there are so many ministries, right? In the central government, you've got Department of Revenue. Department of Revenue is in Ministry of Finance. So under the central government, you've got the Ministry of Finance. In the Ministry of Finance, there's Department of Revenue. In the Department of Revenue, you've got two boards, Central Board of Direct Taxes and Central Board of Excise and Customs. So the service tax is administered and collected by Central Board of Excise and Customs, right? CBEC, very good. Some more review questions here. Mention the services which are excluded from the definition of service under Section 65B 44 of the Finance Act. Do you remember? Services which are excluded. I had given you three boxes. One, what is a service? Second, what is a declared service? And third, the services which are excluded. Actionable claims. Very good, Sneha. Anything else? Employee employer services. You remember? Yes? Anything else? If you are able to recall? I'm able to recall some of them. No, charitable is not covered, is not excluded. Though you can say that, but it is not specifically excluded. It is not even included. You're getting my point? No, there is a, when we talk about law as a subject, this is something which is an important interpretation. Charitable services are not included. I am talking about the services which are excluded. Transfer by gift and charitable services are not included because it is not even passing the first test. It is not even passing the first test. I am talking about those services which, though are passing the first test, but are still excluded. You're getting my point. Services on immovable, on transfer of rights in the immovable property. You remember that? Services which are considered as deemed sale within the meaning of clause 29A of Article 366. Fees taken by a court or an arbitral tribunal while providing any particular decision. See, this is something which is passing the first test. It is service provided by one person to another for a consideration, but still it has been excluded. Right? So, transfer by gift and charitable activities will not be covered over here. Is the point getting clear? One more review question, very simple. Surface engineers manufacture and supply centralized lubrication system. They also undertake erection and commissioning at the site as a part of their business activity. They're providing centralized lubrication system, and they also undertake erection and commissioning at the site as the part of the business activity. Now, service engineers paid central excise duty on the whole value of the centralized lubrication system, including that of services of erection and commission. They did not pay the service tax separately on the value of services, contending that there could not be levy of tax under two parliamentary legislations on the same transaction. The department demanded service tax on the value of service and imposed penalty on surface engineers. Examine with the help of the case law whether the action of department is lawful. Here, what is happening is he says that both central excise and service tax are being charged by the same department, and under both are under the central government. So he says that I am already paying excise on the complete transaction. Why should I pay service tax separately? Why should I pay service tax separately, assuming that the rate of excise is lower than the rate of service tax? Then, though definitely he's in a beneficial situation, department says that no, this is something which is not done. You have to pay service tax on the service portion and excise duty on the manufacturing portion. So, and therefore the department has imposed a penalty also on surface engineers. Is the claim of the department correct or not? What do you say? It is correct. So here this has also been held in a judicial decision in the case of Commission of Service Tax versus Lincoln Helios, India. In this particular case, the High Court has said that excise duty is levied on the aspect of manufacture and service tax is levied on the aspect of service. So there is no question of double taxation. You are and the SECI has further said that they cannot be levy of taxation under two acts. So this is not the case, though the court said that okay, because there is a confusion, and so therefore we are giving you a benefit of doubt, and therefore we are not putting any penalty on you. But definitely in this particular case you have to pay both the excise duty as well as service tax, so you have to pay whatever is the balance amount. Another review question is define the meaning of services under service tax. So now you know the meaning. You have got, now when we talk about services under service tax, if this a kind of a question comes in the examination, you have to look at four aspects. First, what is included in service? It includes any transaction, any activity done by one person for another for a consideration, and it includes declared services. So you have to mention those declared services. Then you have to give the exclusions, that these are the exclusions, and then you have to give the explanations. Then the definition becomes a complete definition. Explanations are like when it is a establishment of one person in taxable territory and as well as in the non-taxable territory of unincorporated entity, etc. All those explanations which I've discussed with you. So the definition becomes complete with all the four parts. Is it getting clear? Is it getting clear? Now, the last area that I have to discuss with you today, because in the next class I will be starting with the negative list and the mega exemption notification, is the bundled service. Is the bundled service. Now, what is a bundled service? See, Abhi, when I looked with you the definition of works contract, I told you when there is a contract for service, but material is provided incidental in that. I'm now talking about a situation where two services are getting bundled. For example, when you travel by an airline, you are getting the air transport service, right? Along with that, you also get the catering service, because on the board of the flight, you are also provided with food. So there are two services which are getting merged over here: the air transport services plus the catering service. This is called a bundled service, right? Similarly, when you go for an event management services, now there are many services getting bundled over there, isn't it? We have there the Shamiana and the Pandal services also, the catering services also, the decoration services also. Lot of services are getting merged. They're getting bundled, right? So bundled services means a bundle of provision of various services, wherein an element of provision of one service is combined with an element of provision of any other service or services. Now, at present, we have got the same service tax rate on all the services, irrespective of the kind of service it is. So you would question me that, ma'am, how does it make a difference? Whether you are bundling the services or you're not, it does not make any difference. It generally comes to a mind. But you must also note that there are various services on which abatement is available. Like on catering services, you get an abatement, right? So when we talk about, because of abatement, the rate of service tax actually comes down on that particular service. So therefore we have to understand how are we going to charge service tax, and how are we going to find out how much is the amount for air transport and how much is the amount for catering, because the bill given to you is of one amount, right? Now if the various elements of such services are naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business, like when you go for a 4 nights 3 days package in a hotel, in that situation they also give you a free breakfast, right? Generally it is very common. When you go for a 3 night 4 days package, the breakfast is complimentary. Now we have to look at what is the essential characteristic of the service, whether it is the catering service or it is the hotel service, that is a boarding and lodging facility, right? So the essential character of that particular transaction is provision of hotel accommodation, not the catering thing. So the rate, whatever rate would be applicable on hotel accommodation, that rate will be applicable on the full bill amount. Is it clear? Is it getting clear? Okay. But if the services are not naturally bundled together, like you can separate them, but you haven't separated them. It is quite possible. Though you could have separated them, but you haven't separated them. There's nothing like complementary over here. Like, you've got 2 floors of a house and you give them on rent for two different purposes. One is for residential purpose, another is for commercial purpose. If you give a house for residential purposes, there's no service tax. But if you give a property on rent for commercial purposes, there's a service tax. So, but you have entered into one particular agreement, which is a consolidated rent agreement, where both the floors have been given together. Now, in that particular situation, the service tax would be at the highest rate for the consolidated agreement, right? So, even if the residential service is exempt from payment of service tax, if you make a consolidated agreement, then the service tax will also be charged on the residential part as well. Is it getting clear? Is it getting clear? Right? So this is about bundled service. Bundled, may we'll be dividing it into two parts, whether it is naturally bundled or when it is not naturally bundled. If it is naturally bundled, then we take the basic character of the service, and if it is not naturally bundled, then we take it as at the highest of all the rates. Right? Clear? So the negative list aspect, I think we should start in the next class, because it is a topic in itself and a very important topic for examination. So the negative list and the mega exemption notification, I think I would be starting with you in the next class.